The day my son came home with duct tape crisscrossed over the toes of his sneakers and a pink dress code violation sticker on his shirt, I decided I wasn't going to beg anyone to see my kid as human. I was going to learn who hired these people, pull the thread until their titles came off, and take the job they used to ruin a 12-year-old's day. My name's Ben Whitaker. I'm 41, a Midwestern dad with hands like sandpaper and a voice that gets quieter when I'm about to do something permanent. I teach sometimes without a classroom. Used to have one, actually, 8th grade civics, before my wife, Lena, got sick and I traded the cadence of lesson bells for the hum of a forklift at the distribution warehouse off Route 6. I've still got the state admin license I earned back when I thought I'd spend my life in hallways with motivational posters and the smell of dry erase markers. It sits in a manila folder behind our birth certificates and a photo of Lena at our wedding, laughing at a joke she never finished. Our son, Jonah, is 12. He's got Lena's eyes and my habit of methodically taking things apart to see how they tick. The sneakers he wore that day, Lena bought them 3 weeks before her chemo failed. He kept wearing them after she died because they felt like the last thing she picked out for him, because grief does odd math with fabric and rubber and memory. They were worn at the toes. Not ragged. Not filthy. Just honest. The school called it tattered. They used that word, and it stuck to me like a burr. The incident started at Monday assembly. They do it in the gym because the auditorium lost its curtains during budget cuts. Call it character kickoff, which is how you know trouble's coming. Jonah told me it was Coach Miles who saw him, pointed at his shoes, and said loud enough to bounce off the back wall. Front office. Now, in the office, the counselor handed him duct tape and told him to make them appropriate. When he hesitated, she did it herself, eyes narrowing like she was sticking a label on delinquency. Then she put the sticker on his shirt. He told me all this at the kitchen table, his voice flat like a road in winter. He tried to shrug, like boys do when they notice their father's breathing change. "It's fine," he said. Everyone laughed. Everyone. Even Ms. Decker, he said, meaning the assistant principal who tells kids kindness is free. The next day they gave him loaner shoes from the nurse's office. Bleach white, 2 sizes too big, so he could comply. He walked like a baby deer all day while kids tapped the heels and called him clown shoes. When he got home, he took Lena's shoes, duct tape and all, and put them on the mantel next to her urn like they were sacred. "I'll wear them again," he said. "Just not at school." I swallowed a thing I wanted to spit. I asked him, "Did they say why?" He repeated a phrase he'd learned to mean, "Stop arguing. Rules are rules." I called the school the next morning with a calm that had weight. "This is Mr. Whitaker," I said. "Jonah's father." The secretary put me on hold like she was shelving a complaint in an empty closet. Assistant Principal Decker came on. "Mr. Whitaker, we value Jonah. We just need our students to uphold standards. Tattered shoes send the wrong message." "What message?" "That we accept substandard appearance." "What message do duct-taped shoes send?" I asked. She paused. "That we care enough to intervene." "You humiliated him." "We applied the policy evenly." Evenly isn't always fairly. You can purchase new shoes at our recommended vendor to avoid issues. I looked at the bill pile on my counter and at Lena's calendar on the wall with all its squares crossed out and said, "No," she scheduled a meeting. The principal's office looked like a magazine doctor's waiting room. Plants that never cried, photos of smiling kids who never blinked. Principal Klein smiled with his teeth and said, "We're a Title I campus, Mr. Whitaker. We serve a diverse population, but we have to maintain a standard. Shoes matter. Grades matter," I said. "Reading at level matters. Not taking a child's grief and scotch taping it for the room to see matters." He folded his hands like he was tucking a napkin into an argument. "If you have financial hardship, there are resources." "We'll take a resource," I said. "Great. Sign here." He slid a behavior contract across the desk with dress code compliance checked. "No," I said. "Not this. If you refuse, we'll have to consider in-school suspension." I laughed once, the kind of laugh that sounds like a snapped pencil. For wearing his mother's shoes? For refusing to comply? "You think this is about compliance?" He blinked like a man surprised by rain. I took the contract, folded it carefully, and slid it back. You're going to want to rethink your definition of standards. That night, I put on a pot of coffee and opened my drawer of old certs. My admin license blinked at me like a brake light you've been ignoring. I booted my laptop. Policy is a building. If you find the blueprints, you'll find the load-bearing walls and you'll know where to push. I read the district's dress code. I read state admin code. I read the federal guidance on shame-based enforcement, which isn't what they call it, but that's what it is. I found the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and Title I regulations about barriers to participation, the ones that say you don't create policies that keep kids out of school or out of class because of poverty. I pulled FOIA templates from a site a librarian once emailed me and requested incident logs on dress code violations, emails regarding loaner shoes, vendor agreements for uniforms, and the campus improvement plan. I marked my calendar for the next board meeting and set 3 alarms. In the morning, I delivered Jonah in his mother's shoes to the office and said to Ms. Decker, "He'll be in class today." She swallowed the word no and changed it midair to "we'll revisit at lunch." I sat in my truck, watched him walk down the hall, and then called the district's Title I coordinator. "I'm looking at your policy," I told her. "It doesn't say you're allowed to cover a child's shoes with duct tape and mock him at lunch." Silence. "No," she said. "It doesn't say that. One of your employees did. I'll look into it." "Do," I said. "Before I do louder. People make fun of custodians until they need a door unlocked. People ignore school secretaries until they need the principal's attention." I brought donuts to the front office the next day because I believe in grease when a hinge squeaks. "You're Jonah's dad," the secretary said. "I'm everyone's dad today," I said, and she smiled in a way that meant I'd been upgraded from problem to person with candy. The custodian, Mr. Willis, told me the loaner closet had been a PDA project that turned into a punishment corner. "We used to discreetly give kids shoes," he said. "Then someone thought white shoes would encourage compliance. You can tell what kind of people invent this stuff by how much they care about carpet." The nurse whispered that she'd argued against it. The counselor didn't look up. The cafeteria manager told me they'd stopped letting kids with lunch debt buy hot food last year until the superintendent got a letter from the paper and decided mercy looked good in print. There is a way schools learn, and it is rarely before someone with a pen sees their name. The FOIA came back slow because that's how slow works when a system is nervous. I called the district's general counsel and didn't yell. I asked for the data. It arrived with redactions and little black bars that looked like modesty. The email chains used the words optics and brand and uniformity. The loaner shoe directive had come from Principal Klein, forwarded from his wife, who happened to run the local uniform store under a consulting contract with the PDA to ensure consistency. There it was, nepotism with a bow on it. The incident logs showed that dress code interventions fell hardest on kids in free lunch and on boys with last names that lined up on the left side of someone's politics. I took notes. I like notes. Notes are receipts for truths. I found the campus improvement plan, metrics on math, metrics on attendance, a bullet point for improve school culture that had 0 next to it for evidence. I drafted a complaint to the state education agency citing Title I guidance against practices that shame students for economic hardship, copy-pasted case law about viewpoint-neutral policies, and attached photos of duct-taped shoes and a loaner slip. I copied the board. I copied the superintendent. I copied a reporter I once watched chase a school lunch story like it owed her money. A retired superintendent named Pruitt. She used to park her car sideways in front of Injustice, called me after reading the email. "You still got your license?" she asked. "Yes. Keep it warmed up," she said. Boards panic when a story threatens brand. They'll ask who can clean up without leaving fingerprints. "I'm a forklift driver," I said. "You're a principal who forgot for a minute," she said. "And you're a dad. That's better than a doctorate." The next board meeting smelled like floor cleaner and surprises. People lined up. Some to talk about parking. Some to talk about dress code. Some to defend the sanctity of laces. I waited until the agenda item. Then I stepped to the mic, Jonah's duct-taped shoes in a brown paper bag like a relic. My name is Ben Whitaker, I said. I taught here for 12 years. My wife died last year. My son wore the sneakers she bought him because grief doesn't check your dress code. Your principal covered them in duct tape and your staff laughed. You can call it policy. I call it a mistake with paperwork. I put the email printouts under the document camera. The words Loaner Shoe Program and the uniform vendor contract with Mrs. Klein's signature magnified on the screen. People in the audience who came for parking leaned forward like a new show started. The superintendent shifted. We'll look into this, he said. I already did, I said. Also, Title I guidance says you don't create barriers for participation due to dress. McKinney-Vento says you don't shame kids for poverty. This board approved a policy that lets a person in an office put duct tape on a dead mother's shoes. Fix it. The board president, who has the demeanor of a tired dad at Thanksgiving, cleared his throat. We can't discuss personnel. I'm not discussing personnel, I said. I'm discussing culture. The reporter, Rachel, had her pen out. The superintendent looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. They recessed for consultation with counsel, which is how you spell, we didn't think we'd get caught. Meanwhile, my email blew up. Parents forwarded me photos of their kids in white loaners, like ghosts of compliance marching to algebra. A teacher sent me a message from her personal account that said, "Thank you." A bus driver posted on the community group, "When a kid saws flap, I've got duct tape. I use it to get them home, not to humiliate them." The state agency's automated reply became a human reply by morning. "We've received your complaint." The superintendent called me. "We're placing the Loaner Shoe Program on hold," he said, throat clearing like the sound of a boat leaving the dock. "We'll form a committee. Make a decision," I said. "Then make your committee write it down." "Would you serve on a task force?" he asked. "I'd serve in your chair," I thought. I said, "Yes." The PTA president, a woman who can organize 6,000 cookies in an afternoon, met me at the church basement and said, "We tried to do a clothes closet. The principal took it over and turned it into a sign. Then we're taking it back," I said. "We're going to call it the Closet of Dignity, and nobody's going to see who uses it but the person in need and the person handing the shoes." She smiled like a field getting rain. "We'll need money." I made calls. The owner of the steel plant where Lena's dad worked sponsored a bin. The union bought socks. The coffee shop put out a jar. Jonah drew a flyer. "Take what you need. Leave your pride at the door. Pick it up on your way out." The superintendent's task force met in a conference room that smells like sad sandwiches. They brought policy printouts and long faces. I brought a binder, Pruitt, and a man named Amir, a civil rights attorney who shows up when policy is used like a ruler to wrap knuckles. We proposed exactly what they didn't want to hear. Ban shame-based dress code enforcement, clarify that economic hardship is not a violation, require private conversations, prohibit removal from instruction for non-dangerous dress issues, and build a fund for emergency clothing through Title I and donations. We also asked for something else, transparency. Publish the data quarterly. Who's being cited? For what, by whom? If sunlight can burn, let it tan first. Ms. Decker teared up halfway through and whispered, "We didn't mean to hurt him." "Then you won't do it again," I said. The superintendent went into neutral. "We'll review." I kept pushing the other end of the lever. The uniform contractor angle smelled like week-old fish, so I followed the line. The PTA contract was as flimsy as a paper plate, signed without a vote, awarding preferred vendor status to a company owned by the principal's wife. The kicker? A clause requiring administrative oversight, which explained why the principal had his thumb on the loaner program. The reporter did what reporters do. The headline the next day, "Loaner shoes, vendor ties raise questions at Eastview." The board chair called me asking for a meeting. Pruitt came along because she looks like institutional memory and carries the weight of it. "We're asking for Principal Klein's resignation," I said before their coffee cooled. "Or at least, you remove him pending investigation and appoint an interim who understands that schools exist to hold children, not their reputations." "Do you have someone in mind?" the chair asked with a look that conceded the field. I slid my admin license across the table. I haven't been in a principal's chair for a while, I said. But I never left the work. The superintendent balked. We have processes. Use them, Pruitt said. But use them quickly. The state is watching. The press is watching. Parents are watching. And you just discovered you've been using your authority to sell shoes. Klein resigned at 4:17 p.m. on a Wednesday to pursue other opportunities. The board did it in a special session where the motion used the phrase loss of confidence, which is the administrative version of a pink slip dressed in a suit. They named me interim. I called Jonah from the parking lot and told him. He said nothing for a second. Then he exhaled. Are you going to make coach stop yelling? I'm going to make coach start listening, I said. And I'm going to do the thing your mom always said. Make the rules gentle enough to hold people. My first day as interim principal, I walked into the gym that smelled like decades of feet and floor polish and told students we were changing the rules. I held up the duct-taped shoes like a relic, then put them away. Nobody gets called out for clothes in front of other people, I said. If your outfit is unsafe, we'll fix it quietly. If it's different, we'll let it be. If you need something, ask. The closet is stocked. If you don't have it, we'll find it. If you're cold, we'll get you a hoodie. If you're hot, we'll find you shorts. If you're grieving, we'll give you time. I made the nurse the guardian of the closet of dignity, and we stocked it in sizes and colors that didn't announce themselves from space. We trained staff, role-played private conversations, wrote scripts that started with, "Are you okay?" instead of, "You're out of compliance." We simplified the dress code until it fit on an index card. Cover what needs covering. Wear shoes that won't get you hurt in science lab. No words that punch someone else's right to exist. I sent out a memo with the subject line dignity policy and copied the board, the superintendent, the press, and, because I'm thorough, my own conscience. We audited the vendor relationships. The PDA tore up the old preferred vendor paper and wrote a real RFP. 3 local shops got listed. Mrs. Klein's company withdrew because sunlight hates mildew. The quarterly data went up on our website, a bar chart taller than some folks' patience, showing dress code citations drifting down until they looked like a curve learning good behavior. The state agency closed my complaint with corrective action completed, which is agency for, we see you. We added a line to every teacher's evaluation about maintaining a supportive climate, which meant if you used rules like a bat, you'd be asked to find a new team. We trained on trauma-informed practice, which is fancy talk for listening before you label. We changed the one word in the mission that had bothered me since I first saw it. It said excellence. We added belonging. Then we did the thing that makes belonging true. We put money where the word sat. We created a small dignity fund seated by Title I, the union, the church on 4th, and an anonymous donor who I suspect was the reporter but who will never tell. No fundraiser. No shame. Slip of paper. Request granted. Receipt filed. Kid back in class. Coach Miles apologized to Jonah in my office, eyes on his hands. He'd been raised on standards that measured boys with a yardstick carved in one era and used in another without asking if the wood had warped. I was wrong, he said. I thought rules make men. I forgot mercy makes people. Jonah nodded. Can I still play intramurals? You were never benched, I said. The assistant principal, Ms. Decker, asked to lead a professional development on harm and repair. She cried in front of staff and then stopped crying and started changing. People can. That's the thing. People can. The reporter came back and wrote a second story. The headline made me almost like newspapers. From loaner shoes to dignity closet. School changes course. The photo showed a shelf of sneakers in all sizes, not a single one white enough to blind a kid on his walk to weight and measure. I stayed on as interim through spring. The board posted the job as they must. People applied. So did I. They interviewed me in a room where the plant had been watered and the clock was fixed and the posters didn't lie. They asked me how I'd manage test scores and bus schedules and angry parents and teachers who needed more time and less paperwork. I told them the truth. You can't test a kid into reading if he's wearing humiliation, I said. Fix the doorways. Make the rules quiet. Pay attention to who's always in the office for the wrong reasons. If we get belonging right, proficiency will jog to catch up. I got the job. On the last day of school, I stood on the front steps and watched kids spill out like marbles. All noise and light, shoes of every kind. Thrift store boots, skate shoes, clean sneakers bought with save tips, Crocs that made me wince but not intervene. Jonah walked up in his mother's sneakers. They were cleaned and stitched along the toe with a careful hand, mine, and the duct tape was gone. Kids looked at them and then looked at him and then looked away because shoes were no longer a story anyone wanted to hear. He bumped my shoulder. "You're a good principal," he said without eye contact because 12. "I'm your dad," I said. "The principal thing comes second." Summer brought quiet like a band packing up. We replaced the hallway posters with photos of our own kids. We painted the nurse's office. We put a small brass plate on the closet of dignity with a line Jonah wrote. "Take what you need. Keep your head up." We sent. The morning a counselor wrapped silver duct tape over the logo on my boys' sneakers and laughed. I stopped asking nicely and started reading the contracts they hoped no parent would find. I'm Maya Delgado, 39, cafeteria manager by paycheck, teacher at heart, and a mother who learned the hard way that grief leaves fingerprints on the smallest things. Like the frayed canvas on a pair of shoes your kid won't give up because his abuela picked them out before the hospital got loud. My son, Leo, is 11 and built like a question mark straightening into an exclamation point. He came home with a pink dress code violation stuck to his chest and that duct tape crosshatching the toes. "They said it's more uniform," he told me, voice flat. I peeled the tape back like a bandage, slow because he flinched. In the office the next morning, the assistant principal gave me the tone they reserve for parents they'd rather not see. "We apply the rules evenly," she said. "Tattered footwear undermines standards." "What undermines standards," I said, "is taking a child's grief and turning it into decor." She gestured to a loaner shoe shelf, bleach white sneakers lined like teeth. "All students have access. Access to humiliation is not equity." She smiled that Ferris wheel smile that goes nowhere and scheduled me for a meeting I didn't intend to lose. That night I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon and open the district website. Policy is drywall. Hit the studs and the whole wall shakes. I pulled the dress code. I pulled Title I guidance. I pulled McKinney-Vento. I found a line they all pretend not to read. No policy or practice may create a barrier to participation based on economic hardship. I filed records requests for dress code incident logs, loaner shoe directives, and any contracts or preferred vendor agreements touching uniforms. I copied the district Title I coordinator and the state ombudsman just to let the room know I could read. The cafeteria is a confessional if you treat it right. The librarian, Ms. Reed, slid into the booth during my break and whispered, "They've been sending kids to me for compliance counseling. I give them a bookmark and send them to class." The nurse sighed. "We had a clothes closet once. Quiet, kind. It got branded." Mr. Carr, our custodian, leaned on his broom and said, "There's a pile of white size 12s in the back nobody asked for. Invoice says, Culture Initiative." The FOIA came back with the kind of black boxes you get when someone is proud of their redaction tool. Still, enough leaked through. The principal, Rourke, had forwarded a uniform excellence presentation from a vendor that offered rebates for district-wide alignment. In the margins, potential PDA partnership. In the bank statements the board posted without realizing I can add, small rebate checks hit a discretionary account labeled Student Culture Fund. The loaner shoe policy was attached, signed by Rourke, with a line that said, "To maintain optics." I printed everything, color-coded tabs like a woman who has been underestimated for sport, and took it to a retired district CFO named Gabe who eats breakfast at the diner I mop at night. He ran his finger down a ledger like a man petting a cat that might bite. "That's an unapproved vendor kickback," he said. "You can call it a rebate. The state auditor will call it something else." The Title I coordinator called me before lunch. "Maya, we didn't approve any of this," she said. "It violates guidance." "Then come see it," I told her. She did. She watched an aide hand a boy white shoes and write his name on a clipboard like he was being processed. She cried behind her clipboard, then composed herself and said, "We're going to fix this." I cued the second lever. The reporter from the county paper loves a story where a grown-up forgets what their job is. She met me in the parking lot and walked away with photos of the loaner shelf, the duct-tape toes, and a copy of the rebate check with Uniform Excellence in the corner. The headline 2 days later, Uniform Rebates, Duct Tape, and Dress Code Optics at Eastside. Board meeting night turned into a parade of tired parents and teachers who can't say what they want to say without losing a paycheck. I went to the mic with Leo's shoes in a brown bag and the phrase reasonable accommodation, ready to be shared like bread. You can call it policy, I said. But when a child's toes show poverty and your answer is tape, that's not enforcement. That's theater. I slid the rebate check under the document camera. People leaned forward like a secret had grown legs. The board froze. The superintendent asked for a recess to consult counsel, which is administrative for, we didn't expect someone to do math. The next morning, the Title I office issued a corrective action plan that might as well have been titled, Stop Being Cruel. The state auditor opened a preliminary review. The superintendent suspended Rourke pending investigation, and the board needed an interim who could steady a building they'd shaken. You still have your admin coursework? Ms. Reed asked me in the cafeteria, like she'd known for months. I nodded. I'd done every class but the internship. Then Leo got pneumonia and life asked for my attention. The state shortage list has a clause most people don't read. Emergency principal certificates for candidates with coursework complete and a mentor appointed. The board chair called me with a voice that sounded like humility learning to walk. Maya, would you serve as interim under mentorship? We need to reset. And you've already started. I said yes because you say yes when the door you've been pushing on finally opens and people you love are cold in the hallway. My first day, I pulled the loaner shelf into the hallway and took a picture of it leaving. We created a dignity closet with Ms. Reed and the nurse in charge, stocked with normal shoes in normal colors, sizes labeled in pencil, no clipboards, no announcements, a door that shuts. We rewrote the dress code onto an index card. Be safe, be clean, be kind. No words that harm. Shoes that won't get you hurt in lab. If you need help, ask privately. We trained staff to say, are you okay? Instead of you're out of compliance. We banned public callouts. We started tracking who gets stopped and why, and posted it quarterly where sunlight could do what it does. The auditor wrote up the vendor mess. The rebates became a repayment. The vendor lost its preferred status it never had to begin with. Rourke resigned to pursue opportunities that didn't include kids. Leo asked me if he could wear his abuela's shoes again. Wear them until they fall apart, I said, and he did. And not one adult said a word because I'd put it in writing that the only people who get to talk about a child's shoes are the child and the person offering help. The PDA took back the closet they'd once dreamed of making. The union bought socks. A mechanic shop paid for steel toes for a kid starting a part-time job. The graph of dress code incidents slid down like a sled in February. The graph of reading at grade level started to climb because funny thing, kids read better when no one's chasing them about their laces. I saw Rourke at the gas station once, staring at the card reader like it owed him an apology. He said, we were trying to teach standards. Standards hold people up, I said. If they don't, they're weights. If you want my moral, it's simple. Dignity isn't a line item you can cancel. You don't get to tape over poverty and call it pedagogy. If your policy is louder than a kid's laugh, rewrite it. And if they won't, learn the paperwork, bring a highlighter, and be ready to wear the badge they used to bruise your kid. Only gentler, and with the door propped open. The night they marched my daughter across the gym in bleach-white loaner shoes, I stopped being their bus route and became the person with the keys to their office. I'm Curtis Lane, 44, former social studies teacher turned night custodian when my wife got sick, and a father who learned how quiet rage can be when it's going to be useful. My girl, Addie, is 10 with a gap-toothed grin and a habit of naming stray cats. Her sneakers were hand-me-downs, a little scuffed at the toes, nothing a decent adult wouldn't ignore. The gym smelled like feet and ambition. Coach pointed with his whistle. Office, he said, loud enough to make laughter a sport. In the front office they had a ritual. White shoes, clipboard, a sticker on the shirt like a ticket on a windshield. Addie's chin trembled as they swapped her shoes. We have standards, the assistant principal said. And you have a closet for shame, I answered. He blinked. You can purchase compliant footwear at our partner vendor. You mean the store owned by the principal's brother, I said. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. I mopped those hallways for years. I hear the things said when people forget a person with keys exists. I went home, leaned my mop against the wall, and took out a folder I keep for when systems pretend I'm not paying attention. I still held a valid admin license from another life. I filed requests. Discipline logs by category and student demographic, all communications about dress code enforcement, any agreements with uniform vendors, and the campus improvement plan. I CC'd the superintendent and the civil rights coordinator, not because I expected them to help, but because people behave differently when their names sit next to rules. The data came in a wave of PDFs. The logs were a pattern printed in black ink. Dress code citations clustered in certain grades, certain neighborhoods, certain last names. The vendor agreement was a miracle of shamelessness. Preferred partner status in exchange for community support, which turned out to be a gift card raffle at the fall carnival and store credit for the office to buy more white shoes. I brought the pile to a union rep I trust, a woman named Cherry who can make a copier confess. She whistled. That's a civil rights complaint and a procurement violation, she said. We wrote it up so neat a first-year lawyer would blush. I called a retired principal named Alvarez, who once ran a school with a dress code that fit on a sticky note and a culture that could hold a hurricane. You want a job? He asked after I'd finished. No, I said. I want my kid to use the front door without being a lesson. Careful, he said. That's exactly the kind of sentence that gets you hired. The board meeting was standing room only because Cherry did one Facebook post and our town is allergic to unfairness when you put it in a sentence people can share. I brought Addie's white loaners in a grocery sack and Addie's real shoes in my hand. These, I said, holding up the white ones, are not compliance. They are a message. Your family doesn't measure up, so we'll measure you for everyone. I put them down soft, like they were a live wire. Then I put up a chart violations by zip code and race. Gasped. Someone's receipt fell to the floor and nobody picked it up. The superintendent shifted into sincerity. We will review policy, he said. We will consider alternatives. Consider this, I said, and clicked to a copy of the vendor agreement showing the principal's brother's signature. Your principal turned shame into store credit. They recessed to consult counsel. The next day, the Civil Rights Office asked to interview Addie. They asked me if I had a preferred remedy. Yes, I said. Stop calling poor non-compliant. Stop calling humiliation enforcement. And put someone in that office who can say the words, "We were wrong," without choking. The superintendent called me that afternoon with the voice of a man who has found an exit and is willing to share it. We're placing Principal Hanks on leave, he said. We need an interim. Alvarez, I said. If you can't have him, he said. Would you take it? You still have your license. We can file an emergency appointment. We need someone who knows the building, who the kids already nod to. I thought of my wife who taught kindergarten and believed in soft landings. I thought of Addie, who had learned the word optics before she learned long division. I said yes. My first act was small and loud. I carried the loaner shelf to the curb and put a free sign on it. It was gone in an hour, somebody's garage now holding the relic of a bad idea. I turned the nurse's supply closet into the dignity room. Shoes in all sizes, socks in bins, sweaters folded, a mirror, a door that shuts, a sign that says, take what you need, keep your head up. We wrote a new policy on one page. No public callouts. No removal from class for non-safety dress issues. No loaners that announce someone's bank account. Private conversations or not at all. We trained staff to start with, are you comfortable? Are you okay? We put the vendor agreement on the agenda and tore it up with a vote. The brother tried to shout, cancel culture. But what canceled him was procurement law. The Civil Rights Office issued findings. Disproportionate enforcement, improper partnerships, corrective action required. We posted quarterly data so no one could hide patterns behind polite emails. The PTA president cried in my office because all she'd wanted was a quiet closet to help kids, and she'd gotten a storefront humiliation rack instead. We're going back to how we do things in kitchens and churches, I told her. Quietly, kindly. A month in, Addie walked into school in her scuffed sneakers and nobody said a word. Coach asked if she wanted to help roll the ball rack to storage. She did. He apologized without making her carry his guilt, which is a skill we practiced with adults in a circle until they understood apologies aren't about relief. They're about repair. Hanks resigned. The board posted the principal job and, because this is America and paperwork wins wars when it's carried by someone who loves kids, they hired me. I took off my custodian keys and put on a badge that made me remember the first time I held a classroom roster and felt trusted. I kept my mop in the corner of my office to remind myself what a school actually runs on. We put a brass plate on the dignity room, the kind you sink your finger into without thinking. Addie chose the words, "This room is yours." The dress code incident line flattened. The reading scores climbed like someone had finally taken their foot off the brake. Kids started bringing friends to the dignity room not to gawk, but to say, "They have the good socks, the ones that don't bunch." I saw Hanks once at the hardware store, frowning at a rack of levels like balance is something you can buy after the fact. He said, "We were trying to teach accountability." I said, "We are. If you want a moral, here it is. If your policy can't say, 'I'm sorry,' it should at least shut up. If your standard only works on a catalog, it isn't a standard. It's a costume. And if the people in charge forget that kids are supposed to be the loudest thing in a school, take their keys, open the door, and show them how quiet kindness can get the work done." The day my granddaughter walked into my office in bleach white loaner shoes 2 sizes too big and a compliance sticker slapped on her chest, I stopped typing other people's memos and decided to write the one that would end this. My name is Denise Harper, 47, school secretary for 15 years, grandmother by necessity and choice. My daughter fell off the map 2 winters ago, and I caught her little girl before the ground did. Kayla is 9 and stubborn, the kind of stubborn that keeps light on inside a kid when adults forget to pay the bill. She wore hand-me-down Converse with the rubber peeling at the toes because her mother gave them to her the week she got clean. "They still feel like her," she told me once. I should have been at the front desk answering phones and laminating hall passes when the assistant principal marched Kayla into the office in those white boats we keep on a shelf like dental tools. "Dress code," he said to me without eye contact, like I was furniture that took messages. Kayla didn't cry. She looked at her feet like they belonged to someone else. At lunch they made her sit at the front table until mom brings proper shoes, which is a cruel joke when your mother is a wish and your grandmother runs the copier. I took a late break and walked her outside. "Do they hurt?" I asked. She shook her head no. The way kids lie to keep you from lifting something heavy again. "We'll fix this," I told her. "With what, Nana?" "Paper," I said, because I've watched paper topple people who thought their title made them tall. I went back in, closed my office door, and pulled the policy binder I know better than the principal. Dress code. Title 1. McKinney-Vento. State Admin Code. I've printed these pages so many times I can hear where the staples pull. No policy shall create a barrier to participation due to economic hardship. There it is in black and bureaucratic. I filed requests from my school email, incident logs for dress code by grade and demographic, copies of any loaner shoe directives, vendor agreements for uniforms. I CC'd the district Title I office and the superintendent's assistant because I know who actually reads things. Then I walked down to the nurse's room. "Who gave you those white shoes?" I asked. She sighed like a woman who has been trying to do good inside the shape of bad. "They came with the new principal." "Optics," he said. "We used to keep normal shoes in a back cabinet." Quiet. Mr. Lewis, the custodian, leaned in my doorway that afternoon and spoke like a man who decided I was safe. "You hear why the principal's so invested in uniformity?" he asked. "His sister owns the uniform shop on Maple. Preferred vendor. We're partnered." He made air quotes like they hurt. In the dress code logs I got back, I saw what I expected. The kids flagged most often live in the apartments behind the grocery store. The words loaner and white show up hundreds of times. In an email from the principal to the PTA president, keeping shoes white maintains brand. For a school. Invoices showed rebates from that uniform shop deposited into a culture account. It looked like fundraising. It smelled like kickbacks. After dismissal, I took a walk past our library. The librarian, Ms. Wilson, has a spine like a lighthouse and a whisper like a book turning pages. I've been handing out bookmarks instead of infractions, she said. Nobody wants to listen until a parent's angry. I smiled. A grandmother's angrier. That night, I printed everything and drove to the diner where a retired CFO named M.O. drinks black coffee and reads numbers the way poets read psalms. He flipped through my stack and tapped the rebate line with a fingernail. They can call it a community partnership, he said. An auditor will call it what it is. The board meeting drew a crowd because I made copies with the good paper and slipped them into purses and lunch boxes and the hands of two reporters who liked their scandals with receipts. I stood at the podium with Kayla's white shoes in a brown bag and the policy on the overhead. You wrote that no policy can bar a child because they're poor, I said. Then you made poverty a stage. You called it brand. You gave my granddaughter shoes that told the whole cafeteria exactly how much money we don't have. You violated your own promise and the state's. I slid the vendor agreement under the document camera. The principal's signature sat next to his sister's. Someone in the audience gasped. The board president asked for a recess to speak to council, which is grown up for panic. The superintendent called me the next morning. We're suspending the loaner program, he said. We will investigate the vendor relationship. Do it fast, I said, or I will file with the state and the feds, and I will schedule a press conference by the swings. The Title I coordinator emailed an hour later. This practice is not compliant. Corrective action plan attached. The principal was placed on leave by afternoon. That's not justice. The step 1. We need an interim who knows the building. The superintendent told me in a conference room that smelled like printer toner and fear. You do, I said. Me. He blinked. Do you have the credentials? Admin coursework done, I said. Clerk exam passed. 15 years running this place without a badge. State has an emergency principal certificate for candidates with a mentor. He stared at me like a woman had just walked through a door he didn't know was open. Who's your mentor? Mrs. Choi, I said, naming a retired principal who had taught me how to breathe through chaos. She already told me she'll come back for a season if it means Kayla gets to wear her shoes. They signed the emergency appointment because public pressure and policy make brave friends when you invite them to the same table. I walked out of that room with keys I used to borrow and walked back in through the front doors kids are supposed to use. My first act was to roll the white shoe rack into the hallway and put a sign on it. Free. No longer needed. It vanished and I didn't ask where. We turned the counselor's storage room into the dignity closet. Real shoes in every size and color. Socks that don't itch. A little mirror and a door that shuts. A sign that says, take what you need. Keep your head up. We rewrote dress code enforcement onto an index card. Be safe. Be clean enough to sit next to someone. No words that punch. Shoes that won't slip in science lab. If there's a problem, ask in private. You will not be removed from class because your family is broke. We trained adults to replace "you're out of compliance" with "are you okay?" We tracked who was being stopped and why, and we published it every quarter so Sunlight could do what it does without getting bored. The auditor wrote up the rebates. The vendor agreement died. The principal resigned with a letter that sounded like a mirror arguing with itself. The PTA took back the dream they'd had before people with titles smelled control. A quiet closet staffed by people who actually love children. Kayla wore her mother's Converse 3 more months until the rubber went for good. When she asked for new shoes, we went to the thrift store and picked a pair that made her jump higher. Nobody called her to the office. Nobody taped her story to her toes. On the last day of school, I put a small brass plate on the